processes as the basis not simply for our motor activity in the world, but for our experience of having a shared world in common with others. Gallese suggests that simulation is not just an operation of motor control, but is a, and I quote, more general and basic endowment of our brain. If it is mental because it has content, and if it is sensory motor because its function is realized by the sensory motor system, simulation is also, and crucially, embodied. It is embodied not simply because it is realized neurally, but, and I quote again, because it uses a pre-existing body model in the brain, and therefore involves a non-propositional form of self-representation. Gallese notes that this function of embodiment involves exaptation, or exaption, or the carrying over of an adaptive biological function to a distinct functionality, in this case, sensory motor integration for body control purposes. As exaptation, embodied simulation thus comprises a technical operation of the body, and indeed a technical operation of the body on itself. An operation that, in one description, that of philosopher Cornelius Castoriadis, who borrows Freud's term Anlehnung, leaning on, has correlated with the origin of the human as a species. In what I have to say today, I want to take seriously this marking of embodiment as a technical operation. What does it mean for philosophy, for cultural theory, for neuroscience, to install embodiment in the position of mediator between the body and itself? This question, which is shared across the various enterprises joined together here today,
words about this film, and I think that they are bring things to an end. So this, it's an ancient coin. It's a Greek coin from the collection of the MFA in Boston, and one of the first coins ever to be produced. So it's about 2,500 years old. And what we did is we melded it in a very high speed in the film, and we projected it backward. So we started with the material in its chaotic order, or chaotic form that is moving in this kind of a desire somehow to train it or to leave a portrait, a human stamp on it. This portrait or coins haven't changed throughout those 2,500 years. So still now the same, it's always a profile of a monarch, the dimension kept exactly the same, and it seems that this tradition of coins probably is now coming close to its end, and soon they will be all phased out. And this whole film, like a lot of work that I'm doing, I didn't touch upon this, it's about this tension that exists between an attempt to hold on or retain a memory with the acceptance that something is just fading away or turning into ephemeral. Okay, I'll finish here, I think.
So the only comment I would like to make is that it's an interesting, significant convergence that I see between the talks that we heard here, Mark's talk and Vittorio's, and I would say, the way these works mobilize cutting-edge digital photography, high speeds, high resolution, excess of detail, actually makes, I should say, the flesh of the world more available to embodied simulation. Okay, if there are questions.
Can you say more, Ori, about, you said about the image of the flowers exploding, that there's more visual information here than any look or a human looking at it could actually capture. So I'm curious about that, and I tell you why, because I'm interested in the way that films like, for example, Transformers, have these scenes where the things transform into the machines transform, that also have this kind of quality of having so much visual detail that they're literally unprocessable by us in the real time of the film viewing, right? So you're obviously after something else here, but I'm just curious about what you mean by that when you say that.
But there is a difference between this work and Transformer in the sense that Transformer use CGI.
Right.
What I'm trying to do is to use what I see as the kind of something fundamental to photography as a medium that can record something that happened outside in the world.
Right.
So I'm trying to reduce, there is always manipulation, and the initial act of taking a photograph is an act of intervention, but I'm very much conscious of the lens as an optical device that is somehow just absorbing reflected light that is bouncing back from a subject. And what is crucial for me in this instant is that the cameras, what tend to happen now is that in digital photography, unlike film before, it's slightly different, the sensors are getting bigger and bigger, and as a result there are more pixels, and the density of the pixel is also increasing, so we start to move. We see it on our TVs at home, we're constantly moving, so we move from standard definition to high definition. Now, very soon, there will be the 4K resolution, which is about 16 times more than 8K. And there is a certain fascination to regain more and more detail, more and more resolution. And what interests me, those Hasselblad cameras retain such information that allow me to blow the image. And when I blow up my photograph, there is always a question: what is the critical point? At what point the image won't hold together? And actually, when you come close, there will be a dissolution, there will be disappointment. I'm trying to blow it up to a size where, when you come very, very close, and it's the same with the film, there won't be a letdown. So you'll never be able to see, unless it's a choice, but you'll never be able to see the grain, or the image will hold itself together. And those cameras are capable of doing this. So the photographs are blown up to a scale where you can, let's say the butterflies that were in this photograph are larger than life, and because there is so much information on so much data, captured. You can even see the air on the wings, or you can see certain details that you couldn't. I mean, you couldn't see this event anyhow because it's very fast. Because the amount of information, simultaneous information that is presented, we can never digest. But also in terms of detail, you will never be able to absorb all of them without the aid of a magnifying glass or microscope. So it's all these layers of information that are presented in this photograph that are exceeding the naked eye, the ability of the naked eye to see.
I paid attention to the music that accompanied both.
We can't hear you.
I say I paid attention to the music that accompanied the film. And interesting enough, well, the first one reminded me what BBC does with La Mer, but which is the same idea, that while you have this transformation taking place, the music is not changing, it's a minimalist movement, and repeats itself constantly, and also evokes the image that we have, let's say, of the sea and how it bursts and something, or things like that, so what I'm trying to say, while we have here this maximal way of presenting that which we cannot really see ordinarily, you have a minimalist accompaniment as a statement or an interaction. I don't know what the interaction was supposed to be, but the music is absolutely going in the other direction.
Yeah, there is
not in a.
Actually, I was about to show another film. We ran out of time. A film that is titled The Forest. Film that is titled The Forest. I filmed it in Ukraine in 2005, and it's in an area where my father-in-law survived the Holocaust as a young boy, and the forest nearby where a lot of atrocity took place. What we did, we went and I worked with the Ukrainian authorities and local foresters, and trees that were supposed to be taken down, they accelerated the process, they took them down for us. The camera is just traveling through the landscape, and this Arcadian landscape, and everything is pastoral, and occasionally there is these moments where a tree is just collapsing, and we recorded the sounds there very different distances to create the full landscape. So sometimes the recording device is very close, sometimes it will be a few hundred meters away. So it creates this kind of cacophony of trees that are falling in a paranormal. You don't know why they fall. There is no indication. They just, the camera travel, and the camera is lacking any emotion. So the camera is keep moving mechanically through the space. And what I try to do in this film, in the use of sound, it's one of the first time I actually use sound. And I start to realize how important it is. In the forest, the base of the low frequencies of the falling trees were recorded in such qualities that we were able to play them through a subwoofer. So when the viewer sat in the gallery and looked at this film, the bass was actually traveling through the floor and got through the body. So you felt it as a physical experience. And there is something, it's difficult to bring this across here, but it's really important for me that when you watch the film, that the sound is not just, you don't conceive it just as an audio device, but as a physical device that can actually travel, and you feel it. And particularly, obviously, with...
But therefore it has to be repetitious rather than change.
No, I'm not talking about the repetition, but...
It was completely repetitious.
Yeah.
And what we see is changing.
Yeah, well, the sound is changing, and it's quite minimal. And what I tend to do is the sound. A lot of the time, apart from the forest, the sound is created after the film, and it's trying to take various elements that existing in the film and start and develop them. So there will be, when the metal that is liquidating, working with the viscosity of the material, working with various elements that we're taking, and then slowly kind of developing into something that is a fusion between, I suppose, sound design and some sort of composition. It's minimal, but it's constantly moving, and I work...
That I'm aware of.
Yeah, and it takes long time to come to the balance of this sound, because it's really crucial to...
Different usage of time.
Yes.
It uses time differently.
Yes.
Of course, it's a different conception of time.
Yeah.
Thank you. Susan, brief question.
Very brief. Okay.
Well, every second in these films, now actually I'm working on a iOS, I can work on iOS speed, but on this one it's 1 second in real time is 1 minute of film. But it was shot simultaneously with two cameras. So there is a camera that is on the close-up and a camera that is on the establishing shot. So, and obviously the hard drive filled very quickly, so the maximum I could shoot is 7 seconds. So it's about, the entire sequence takes maybe 4 seconds, 3 seconds. The pomegranate is even quicker. The pomegranate is actually the exact event. I cut it toward the end, but there is no, it's only one camera, and just one take. So the camera is just basically a recording device here.
Thank you very much.
Three o'clock.
Now sustain in this eternal presence and will always be alive. Since 2007, I started to create a series of images that are very much related to Old Master's work, but are rooted in the present. One thing that interests me is how, through technological development and new devices, this idea of representation of the world is shifting, and with it, our perception of the world is defined and redefined. And a few examples that I gave are part of this development and evolution. So, I mean, just as another example, before the microscope was invented, we couldn't see those minute particles that all of a sudden through the microscope became available to us, and they expanded our sense of consciousness, similar to astronomical vision. When I started to take these photographs, I was very much interested in certain tensions that exist between works that on one end very much relate to Old Master, but capturing moments that were unavailable to Old Master, that didn't exist, that only became available, only became alive through new technological devices. The interest that I have to Old Master's work is because I think that pictorially, since the Renaissance till now, or the invention of photography, is very much rooted in the same pictorial consideration. The invention of the lens, the whole design of the camera are very much rooted there. And I think that for me, my entire visual diet is coming from those particular compositions and pictorial consideration. So here I'm showing a painting by Jan van Eysen. I was looking at paintings from 17th, 18th century Dutch painters that depicted flowers. I was particularly interested in the tulip and the tulip rush that eventually brought to the collapse of the entire Dutch economy, because there was such desire for those flowers, and people started to speculate and buy the bulbs in order to get the best tulips, and the prices became more and more inflated until eventually everything fell apart. And the photograph that I created, the resolution is low, so it's difficult to see. Photographs that were based not on a particular painting, but on certain consideration in Dutch flower painting, and moments of explosions, moments where those bouquets that I created are falling apart. The photographs were taken at very high speed, so what the camera is depicting, again, a moment that is a paradox. A moment of the bouquet that is still holding together, or the arrangement that is still holding together, but simultaneously are falling apart. So we see elements like the glass vase that is still standing there and very solid, but we can already see some fracture in it, and the whole thing is about to disintegrate. This is another photograph where just the energy of the explosion, we see the smoke of the explosive devices that are pushing through. And there is a question here about the camera or the photograph, and it's keep coming back to this. Photography is very much considered in our historical memory, and still in court, photograph can be used as evidence. In all these photographs, the events that I'm depicting are happening at such a speed that we have no way to digest without the aid of the technological devices. These events are so quick that despite the fact that optically we can perceive them, our brain is too slow to process and to understand this information. These moments can only become available to us through the technological device. And because they are photographs, I think that we take them as real events, as if something was recorded. It's a question if something was recorded or a sense of reality was created. And we have no way really to assess this. And this relationship that the camera has between recalling the world or creating a reality is something that I try to visit or keep revisiting in my work. This is a new series of work that I'm just working on now. It's the first time I show any of these images. And these photographs are related to the exploding flower that I just shown you, but they were taken in different ways. So what's happening in these photographs is I'm no longer looking at the flowers themselves, but those flowers are reflected in a mirror. So the camera is actually pointing at a mirror. The whole event started, or this work started with 3 flower arrangements that were created by Jan Bruegel the Elder. The 3 of them are hanging actually in the Art History Museum in Vienna. And I was attracted to them for various reasons, but it was a very interesting moment at the beginning of the 17th century when Jan Bruegel painted those arrangements. At this point, all the wild flowers disappear completely from the arrangements. All the flowers that he depicted were flowers that require human intervention, horticultural intervention. The flowers that existed in those bouquets could never exist in one bouquet because they were blooming at different times of the year. And it's also with the beginning of imperialism, the flowers that exist in this bouquet came from different parts of the world too. So the bouquets became this held something that one could never experience in the world, although the accuracy of the depiction is such that every flower can be recognized and almost got photographic quality to it. So there was a step of detachment. The paintings also gave the illusion of they record the world or representing a world that is very familiar, or represented actually something that couldn't really exist. The act of painting was an act of invention of the world. In the process of responding to those paintings, we created in the studio those bouquets, but all the flowers were artificial. So every flower was made by hand and painted by hand. And then later, we didn't photograph those flowers themselves, but we photographed their reflection in the mirror. It took us about 4 months to create those bouquets and a fraction of a second to destroy them in those photographs. And what interests me as well is the tension that exists between this painstaking process of creating them and the absolute chaos at the moment of destruction. And the chaos